Hello, my name is Harold Lapidus, and welcome to the Boston Herald podcast. Welcome to Zimmermania 80, celebrating Bob Dylan and Paul McCartney via Buddy, Holly, and Little Richard. I'll be reading off my phone, grab my notes. So if you see me not making direct eye contact, that's why. Don't take it personally. Today, like thousands of other people, I wanted to acknowledge the 80th anniversary of the birth of the artist known as Bob Dylan, if he can be known at all. In attempting to think of something different, I decided I wanted to celebrate the fact that Bob Dylan is still around and creating what I and many others feel is art is vibrant and challenging as anything he's ever done. Unless, of course, you belong to the Grammy nominating committee, hashtag losers. But Bob Dylan is not the only one octogenarian still rocking. Ringo Starr, John Baez, Willie Nelson, and Jorma Kaukonen, all of whom have shared the stage with Bob, have already reached that plateau, and many others, including members of the Stones, the Who, the Kinks, are not far behind. However, last year, the year of the plagues, both viral and political, it meant much of what we love to do was either postponed or canceled, including Dylan's so-called never-ending tour. We had many virtual events, not by Bob Dylan, but there were presentations on Zoom, YouTube, Stage at Facebook, and other platforms to get us through. Artists began posting songs online as little gifts to their fans, but something to cheer them up. But Bob had other plans, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. I'll have the link on the page that is associated with this. Not if you're going to read it. Probably not. Anyway, it says Dylan's manager, this is fictional, of course. Dylan's manager, hey, Bob, lots of singers are doing fun things to cheer up their fans at the moment. Bob Dylan says, I've got just this thing. It starts, was a dark day in Dallas, November 63, and 17 minutes later, play that blood-stained banner, play Murder Most Foul. Needless to say, Bob Dylan isn't here to make light of things. He makes us think, usually, although he makes light of things as well. Last year, early on in the pandemic, out of nowhere, Dylan dropped a 17-minute single, technically his first #1 single ever, Murder Most Foul, and rumors of a new album started to gain momentum. Most of the other songs artists shared were pretty forgettable. Do you remember the Stones Living in a Ghost Town? I mean, I had to be reminded of it. I'd forgotten all about it. And of course, Mick Jagger and Dave Grohl had a new post-pandemic collaboration. And not judging these songs, it was saying they didn't stay in the public consciousness for too long. Certainly not mine. But for me, the only other album of new compositions I listened to repeatedly last year was McCartney 3, recorded in Rockdown, as Paul calls it. Paul was just recording for the fun of it, apparently to keep himself occupied during these difficult times with his surrounded by family, although I doubt Paul goes very long without creating some sort of music. Much like Dylan, Paul has had to escape his past, and much of his early post-Fab output, most notably the only album that was called the Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney album, Ram, is now celebrating its 50th anniversary. It received terrible reviews upon release, although it was a commercial success. It's now regarded as a masterpiece. And the first Wings album, Wildlife, was done quickly, inspired by Dylan recording albums in a matter of days. Bob and Paul, first name basis, have each tried on various musical disguises, just moving forward, following wherever their artistic compass will lead them. McCartney 3 is kind of an anti-rough and rowdy ways. It's someone having fun. He's not trying to make big statements or anything like that. He's just in his little studio doing whatever he felt like doing. A few years back, Dylan praised McCartney, saying he can do it all, and that's what Macca is doing here. He plays almost all the instruments. He wrote the songs. He sings them. Much like 1970s McCartney and 1980s McCartney 2, both unfairly maligned upon release, now with rehabilitated reputations and sounding much more au courant than contemporaneous releases that received rave reviews at the time. Macca being Macca, let him be. So I thought, let's celebrate Bob and a Beatle. Paul, incidentally, is turning 79 next month. 10 years and 70 days ago, in my former Bob Dylan Examiner column, I began posting 70 articles in 70 days leading up to his 70th birthday. This year, it's just this one little modest video. So let's go back to the beginning. With the many musical influence Elton Gunn and Paul Ramon share, there are two upon which I want to concentrate, Buddy Holly and Little Richard. Bob Dylan famously saw one of Holly's last concerts at the Duluth Armory. When Dylan received the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1998, he mentioned Buddy looked into his eyes. The following year, Dylan staged his own Winter Dance Party tour, and his Grateful Dead-inspired arrangement of Not Fade Away was the closing number for most of that year. When their prefabs were still in Liverpool, they apparently passed on seeing Buddy Holly, but Paul made up for it by buying Holly's publishing many years later. And he had his own annual dance parties, and I got to attend one in 1999. Paul came on and sang Rave On with the Crickets. And of course, the name Crickets was most likely one of the main inspirations for the name the Beatles, as many of you know. Of course, Paul appeared in documentaries. I recorded an album of Buddy Holly songs called Holly Days it's a Danny Lane record, but it's really a Wings record. There are other things that kept the connection with Buddy Holly. And even did a Buddy Holly tribute song not that long ago. And then there's Richard Penniman, better known as Little Richard, whom we lost last year. In high school, Dylan's hairstyle, piled high upon his head, I'll have a picture of that on the blog as well, was inspired by Richard's pompadour. In his Dylan's senior high school yearbook, he wrote that his life ambition was to join Little Richard. And when Penniman died, Dylan wrote one of the few tributes posted on his website, calling him a shining light. And he was apparently in touch with Penniman in his later years. The influence on Paul McCartney is more obvious. Long Tall Sally was a staple of the Beatles' early repertoire and was the closing number at the Beatles' first US shows, even though they had not yet recorded it. After the Beatles split and Paul spread wings, he couldn't bring himself to perform any Beatles songs, but he would perform Lucille, and as a nod to his former band, he would do Long Tall Sally for the encore. The final track on 2012's Tempest album, Dylan ended it with a song called Roll On John, which is a tribute to John Lennon. In Murder Most Foul, Dylan sings Hush Little Children, which is a Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas Mercy Beat reference. And yes, the band is called the Dakotas. You'll soon understand the Beatles are coming and they're going to hold your hand. And he also covered Things We Said Today for a McCartney's cover album a few years back. In a recent interview, McCartney said he admired how Dylan could totally rearrange his songs to the point of unrecognizability, although he said he couldn't even make out when Dylan was singing Like a Rolling Stone when he saw him last time. But he did end it by saying how much he admired him. And yes, I know there's more I could have included here, but I just wanted to make a few observations. I'm sure you have 80 or 90 more Dylan tributes to read today, so I'll let you get to it. But I'm grateful Bob Dylan's still here and Paul McCartney's still here, and that I'm still around to experience whatever they decide to share with us, and that you're here as well, and I can share my observations with you. And I appreciate all the people who've supported me throughout these years. In his tribute to Little Richard, Dylan wrote, "Of course, he'll live forever," as will Bob Dylan and Paul McCartney, and everything they've, well, not everything, but almost everything they've done. Happy birthday, Mr. Bob, and to you as well, Mr. Paul.